Bhavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Saviryam Karavavai Tejas Prinavaditamastu Mavid Vishavai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May Brahman protect us, may he guide us and give us strength and right understanding. May love and harmony be with us all. Om, peace, peace, peace. And good evening. So we are continuing our chapters on Sri Krishna, written by Swami Ramakrishnananda, one of the disciples of Sri Ramakrishna. And this chapter is the Kingmaker, Sri Krishna. And as we left the last time, which was before our Thanksgiving break, the evil Kamsa is yet up to another trick, trying to get Krishna killed. And so he's arranged this elaborate celebration, and he's arranged to have Krishna and his brother Rama fight wrestlers and things like that in order to get them killed. And so for some strange reason, I guess the two divine brothers knew what the trick was and knew they could surpass the problem. So they accepted the invitation. And then we met Akrura, who was the messenger of the evil Kamsa, but he also knew that Krishna must be a divine incarnation, and so he had rather mixed emotions about this whole thing. So we will begin with the paragraph that says, Kamsa was a tyrant.
Kamsa was a tyrant. He threw his own aged father into prison and usurped the throne from him. He was an advocate of debauchery, lustfulness, all sorts of horrible and immoral practices. If any good man dared to stand in his way, he used to get rid of him by at once extirpating him. All good men either ran away from the monster or were killed by him. He was never in any way conciliatory to his nearest and dearest relatives. They happened to be good and God-fearing, so most of them avoided him, preferred to live in distant places beyond his reach. Can the world go on with such a demon as its ruler? And since he was impregnable to all ungodly sentiments, the only way to save the earth from his tyranny was to root him out like a weed that is a bane to the useful vegetation. The father who spares the rod and spoils the child does not do the duty of a father. The government, by letting go all the culprits without punishing them, will be no government at all. For ungoverned vices, in that case, will swallow up society in no time. Hence, to protect his children from the hands of the wicked, God must have to come now and then to the world to destroy the latter and protect the former. Without such divine incarnations, the world would have been destroyed long ago. Hence, the occasional advent of such men is an unavoidable necessity if God wants to preserve his creation.
So, of course, that's really summarizing the sentiment expressed in the Bhagavad Gita, which, of course, was delivered by Sri Krishna, that in every age, God incarnates, comes back when evil increases and good has declined, and the incarnation comes to restore the balance. And so Ramakrishnananda is just summarizing that sentiment here and explaining the reason why Sri Krishna has come down to earth, because Kamsa was such a horrible ruler who was simply destroying anybody that disagreed with him and doing all sorts of wicked deeds, not getting punished for them. So Krishna had to come, and he was going to be able to eventually kill this evil king. All right, let's go on.
And God wants to preserve his creation, for no father wants to see his favorite child murdered before him by the relentless hand of a lawless ruffian, if he is a father at all and if he has power to save. God never wants to destroy his creation. As Rama and Krishna were the incarnations of that God, it was their duty to see all the good men of the land protected and the evildoers scattered, even as the chaff is scattered by the winds. As long as the two brothers graced our earth, they were entirely engaged in weeding out directly or indirectly the useless and baneful plants from the beautiful garden of creation. So crossing the Yamuna without Kura, when the buxom jolly shepherd boys reached Mathura, the memory of Sri Vrindavan, with all their merry pranks there, was totally washed off. For now they directed all their energies to effect the weal of the oppressed. They were at once changed men. They looked around them and found that their dresses and ornaments were not at all keeping with their environments. So they wanted to change them, then proceed to their task. There was the royal dressmaker's place displaying the gaudiest and best of apparel, intended for the use of the royal family. Without much ado, they asked the man to let them have suitable dresses, the dignity of the man being thus offended because he was no less a personage than the great King Kamsa's servant. He wanted to thrash them for their impertinence and then hand them over to police. But like lambs before lions, he and all his party lay dead at their feet. They selected their favorite dresses. Rama attired himself in blue and Krishna in yellow. Thus enhancing their natural beauty by means of art, they walked through the streets of the city. They saw a humpbacked woman carrying charmed garlands and fragrant sandalwood paste for Kamsa. They asked her to adorn their bodies with them. Charmed with their beauty, the woman, who was naturally kindly in her disposition, although her exterior was totally deformed, at once decorated their beautiful persons with the choicest garlands, and so tastefully smeared them with the sandalwood paste that they looked like angels coming down from heaven to see the grand festival that was going to be celebrated on that day in the city. As a reward for her goodness, Sri Krishna, with a single touch, transformed her deformity into the choicest beauty.
So you see that even the ordinary people were quite aware of Sri Krishna's divinity. They could see his divine glow, and his personality and presence charmed everybody that he met, even though they were perhaps not necessarily inclined to be favorable to them. They were immediately enticed to do so. And the humpbacked woman, of course, was of a gentle, kindly nature, but she had gotten into the service of delivering things to King Kamsa. But as soon as she had the opportunity to do something nice for this divine couple, she did so and was handsomely rewarded. Now we can read this symbolically, that someone's inner beauty comes out when you do good deeds. Your good deeds show on your countenance, and you have a certain beauty about you because of the good that you have done. All right.
You want to take a turn?
Sure. Was it not partiality on the part of Sri Krishna to kill a dutiful servant because he did not comply with his unlawful request, and to reward the undutiful maidservant because she obeyed him? The highest duty of every man is to love goodness and godliness, wherever these may be found, and the worst crime which a man can commit is to abet and advocate the unrighteous, ungodliness, perfidy, and inhumanity in others, or to perpetuate those evil actions himself. As has been seen, Kamsa was the personification of evil, and therefore whoever loves and honors him loves and honors evil, and being nothing less than evil itself, he should share the same fate with that evil-minded Kamsa. With the exception of a very few low-minded people, none in the city had any love or regard for that monster, and all were only praying to God to relieve them from the hand of such a tyrant. As a response to their incessant prayers, of God had come down in the form of Sri Krishna to save them. Such was also the case with Kamsa's maidservant, who, made naturally good, could never love and regard the demon in her heart of hearts, although fear made her outwardly loyal to the tyrant, and she got the rewards of her goodness. Of course, you have something similar in the life of Christ, with Herod trying to kill the baby Jesus, but then, of course, Herod died not too long after that, so he didn't have to continue this barrage of tricks to try to kill the young Jesus. So differences in the story that way, but similarity is that there was an evil king involved in the original story. All right. You ready for another paragraph?
Attired in such beautiful dresses, decorated with most beautiful garlands, the brothers attracted naturally the minds of all men and women of the city, who could not take their eyes away from their beautiful persons. They now reached the gate of the arena, and as soon as the man of the Manilas of Kamsa saw them, according to their master's advice, they directed the most ferociously mad elephant against the two brothers, who in no time put the animal to death. Then came forward the two best of wrestlers, Chanura and Mashtika, to meet and wrestle with them, and ultimately to kill them. But their villainy cost them their lives, for no sooner did they meet the two brothers than they were killed. Oh, this enraged Kamsa. He ordered Nanda, the shepherd father of Rama and Krishna, to be thrown into prison, and Vasudeva, their real father, to be killed, the brothers themselves to be driven away from the city. Sri Krishna was too quick for him. He sprang upon the dais where Kamsa was sitting upon his throne with his nefarious courtiers, and catching him by his hair, brought him down to the arena, and in a moment killed him. The villainous friends of Kamsa took arms against the brothers, were similarly served, and the all-conquering hero, with his brother Rama at that time, appeared to his own parents as a boy, to the wicked as an all-ruling and terrible victor, to the wise as the highest truth, to the good as the God of the universe, to the Vrishnisis, his own caste people, as their all-comforting, ideal God.
Yeah, you would have thought that the people serving Kamsa, even though they were working for him, you'd think that they would have realized what a horrible person he was and been relieved, sort of like the monkeys in the Wizard of Oz were relieved when the wicked witch was killed. But they took vengeance on Rama and Krishna and tried to capture them, but they, of course, were then dispensed as well. So finally, good has triumphed over evil in this particular case, but of course, the drama of Krishna is only beginning, and he has to also go through the Kurukshetra war and undo more evil that has descended on the earth in the form of another king who has unrightfully assumed more territory than he should. All right, I'll take a paragraph. When the tyrant with his party was thus killed, peace was restored in no time. All people became happy, and Sri Krishna's first duty was to bring his aged father and mother, Vasudeva and Devaki, as well as the father of the tyrant, Ugrasena, out of the prison. He restored the throne to Ugrasena because he was far above the petty desire to rule over a kingdom, being above all desires. He bowed down to his real father and mother, Vasudeva and Devaki, who at first could not recognize him and his brother. He told them who they were, and their bliss knew no bounds, so much so that they fell down senseless. Being restored to their senses, they embraced their children and bathed them in tears of love. They narrated the cruelty of Kamsa to them and were very happy to hear that the tyrant had been put to death by their own children. All their troubles were ended once for all. The rest of their life they lived very happily with their darlings. And of course, you see Kamsa, here he had dethroned his own father, and then he gets his comeuppance because a usurper of the throne is going to have his throne taken away from him eventually. So you can't get away with these things karmically. Eventually, order is restored, and in this case, the order had to be restored by an incarnation of God. All right, you want to take a paragraph?
Then came a very sad scene. When the shepherd father and mother of Sri Krishna, Nanda and Yashoda, heard that their darlings were claimed by Vasudeva and Devaki, they were beside themselves with sorrow. When the shepherd boys and girls heard that Sri Krishna was not going back to Sri Vrindavan with them, it was worse than a death blow to them. To return to Gokula without Rama and Krishna was something they could not believe, nay, even imagine. But when Sri Krishna himself came and told Nanda, Yashoda, and all the shepherd boys and girls, his playmates and companions, all of whom came with him to see the grand festival, and present their annual tribute to the tyrant Kamsa, that he could not leave his aged father and mother to go with them to Gokula, it was as if a thunderbolt fell upon their heads. They did not know what to do. So fondly did they love him and Rama. Sri Krishna tried to console them much as he could, promised to come back to them after seeing his aged parents, whose eyes had become almost blind with incessant weeping for them in the prison of the tyrant, but who were comforted now and happy after many years of uttermost misery. He told them that it was the first duty of every child to bring comfort to his parents, which he'd been neglecting by leading a merry life in Vrindavan, altogether unmindful of the extreme agony of his parents, whom Kamsa had been torturing with all manner of villainous means. So he could not leave them now on any account. Nanda and Yashoda, who always used to regard him as their darling, did not expect such an answer from him. When they wanted him to accompany them to Gokula, they were astounded at the reply. His playmates looked towards him with wistful supplication. They could not talk, but only looked at him with eyes blinded with tears. He kissed his parents. He kissed his friends. Told them that they ere long he would join them at Gokula. After seeing his parents happy and the shepherds with vacant minds directed their unwilling steps towards their homes, as if they were going to some foreign land. Vaishnava poets have lavished all their arts in describing this extremely pathetic scene, so much so that even a heart made of steel will have to melt in the warmth and fervor of their description.
Yeah, so of course, Yashoda had already assumed that Krishna was her actual child. She was asleep when the switch had taken place. So this came as quite a shock to them to find out what had gone on, you can imagine how devastating that would be. Most people that adopt children are aware of it, but they weren't. Nanda and Yashoda were not aware of it. But he certainly gave the right explanation. He had given them a great deal of his life and love, and so now it was time to go on and restore the balance with his parents. All right, let's continue.
After seeing Nanda, Yashoda, and all the shepherds cross the Yamuna, Rama and Krishna returned to their parents. They made them very happy, lived with them for some months, but they felt ashamed to confess to the pundits that they had not as yet known a single letter of the alphabet. So they asked their parents' permission to go to Varanasi to prosecute their studies there at the feet of a certain sage. Unwillingly, the parents consented, and the two went directly to the sage, who was very glad to admit them as his disciples. Rama and Krishna, with other brahmacharins, lived with and served their guru, who took particular care of them. They used to go to the neighboring forest with other boys to bring fuel for cooking and sacrifice. Sometimes they used to go out to beg rice and other edibles for their teacher, were perfectly pleased with their abstinent life. They were so very intelligent that they were able to learn within 6 months everything which the sage could teach. And after finishing their studies, they wanted to give their teacher some remuneration for his kind care and love towards them. The wife of the sage asked that her dead child might be restored to life and brought back to her from the abode of death, where it had been taken away a year before. For she knew that Rama and Krishna were not ordinary individuals. They fulfilled her request by restoring her own child to her, and with the permission of their teacher, they returned to Mathura, versed in all schools of philosophy and the Vedas. Their parents got back their life, as it were, on seeing them.
Oh, that's quite a story right in itself. You know, there are incidences in the literature of education where children are allowed just to play for the first 6 years and then starting their schooling at the age where most people would be in grades 5 or 6. And they find that they indeed are able to make up a lot of that time in a very short time because their minds are more mature. Now, of course, Rama and Krishna here are no ordinary human beings, and they have extraordinary minds, so they're not going to have any trouble catching up. So it's interesting that they hadn't undergone the traditional training there, and perhaps this is where the traditional Vedic idea of learning from a guru and so forth was sort of codified into the Vaishnava tradition, where you live with your teacher and serve them while they are teaching you. So a very interesting little episode there. All right.
Kamsa was the son-in-law of the most powerful monarch of the period, Jarasandha, the king of Magda, or Bihar. When Kamsa was put to death by Sri Krishna, his 2 widowed wives, the daughters of Jarasandha, went away to their father's palace, and informed him about the wretched lot to which they had been reduced by Sri Krishna, and went and entreated him to punish the wicked man. The cause of all their sorrow, Jarasandha, as the head of a vast army, blockaded Mathura, but his army was routed by the limited number of Ugrasena's army through the commanding skills of Sri Krishna. Jarasandha was not a man to be put down easily, and so he attacked a second time. But Sri Krishna was again able to repel him with all his forces. Nay, he was successful in routing him with all his army in many succeeding attacks, which in all numbered 17.
So Sri Krishna's duties had just begun And so he has yet another not so great king, apparently. Apparently this king doesn't know that much about the difference between good and evil if he couldn't recognize that Kamsa was a wicked person and married his daughters off to him. So he had to get his comeuppance as well. And I don't know why 17, that's an interesting number. One wonders what the symbolism of that is. And it doesn't occur to me exactly what that might mean. So, we continue in studying the life of Sri Krishna. We will find that he was never aggressive. He always defended himself against the aggression of others. He was altogether averse to shedding human blood unnecessarily. He was always for peace at any cost. But when war was inevitable, he taught his adversaries that he was more than a match for them, till of their own accord most of them used to surrender, while the obstinate were sure to be ruined completely. This clearly proves his human and all-protecting nature. He could feel for all. After killing Kamsa, he lamented for him, for such a soft-natured man war was altogether distasteful. For such a soft-natured man, war was altogether distasteful, as innumerable men were to be offered as sacrifices to it. So, when Jarasandha repeatedly attacked Mathura, he concerted a successful plan to avoid further attacks from that redoubtable enemy. In the hilly island of Dwarka, he ordered a town as well as a fort to be built. When that was completed, he removed Ugrasena's capital to that place, well protected by the hill fort of Raivataka. But it was not without considerable difficulty, as at that time he was simultaneously attacked on both sides by Jarasandha, on the one hand, and on the other hand by Kalayavana, a non-Aryan king, being a friend to the king of Magadha, was instigated by him to attack the Yadavas at Mathura. Sri Krishna wanted to shed as little blood as possible. Moreover, he did not like to meet the innumerable forces of the two armies with his limited number of men, so he went alone in disguise to the camp of Kalayavana and stood before the latter, who easily detected him and ran after him to catch him. Sri Krishna was a better runner than the king, so, although they went far away from the camp, still the latter could not overtake him, till he entered and hid himself in a cave. The king followed in search of him and saw a man lying on the floor. He took him to be Sri Krishna and kicked him with his foot. The man, who was a great sage named Muchakunda, thus kicked and suddenly got up and looked at him with eyes burning with anger, and at once reduced him to ashes. Sri Krishna came back to Mathura, while the death of Kalayavana so disheartened his army that it left the project of attacking Mathura and returned to its own territory. Then it was not difficult for the Yadavas to meet and rout Jarasandha's troops. When thus the enemies were routed, all the Yadavas, led by Sri Krishna, went to their new city of Dwarka, and there lived peacefully ever afterwards. So Sri Krishna is showing his great skill at fighting battles, and of course Arjuna picked wisely that he would have Sri Krishna as his charioteer to direct him in the fight in the Kurukshetra war rather than his army, because it was Sri Krishna that was the magic behind all of the defeats that were accomplished by the army. It was Sri Krishna's genius as a leader and even in military things. So he was not just skilled in spiritual things, but he was quite skilled at leading armies into battle. And he's getting a lot of practice here. He seems to have had innumerable battles to fight, and so he is gaining a lot of skill at being the head of armies. All right, want to take a paragraph?
After this, proposals for the marriage of Rukmini, the most beautiful daughter of Bhishmaka, king of Vidara, were being made. Sri Krishna asked the king for the hand of his daughter. This accomplished lady also had a great love for Sri Krishna. Bhishmaka, instigated by Jarasandha, did not comply with his request and wanted to give his daughter in marriage to a cousin of Sri Krishna named Suspala, who was his inveterate enemy. The day of marriage was settled. All the kings were invited to it except the Yadavas. So Krishna wanted to take her away by force, because that kind of marriage, which went by the name of Rakshasa Vivava, was highly esteemed by all Kshatriyas in those days. When on the day of her marriage, Rukmini was going home from the temple after performing her worship, Sri Krishna suddenly came up to her and took her upon his chariot. As soon as Bhishmaka and all the royal guests saw this, they came upon him, but he successfully defended himself and his brother against innumerable odds.
His bride, it says, yeah.
And at last succeeded in taking her home safely, where they were married in great pomp. The married couple were indeed very happy, for they loved each other very ardently.
So one adventure after the other, where Sri Krishna has to defeat various enemies, either by his own hand or by leading armies. And again, he is successful in doing something dharmic, which was headed to be non-dharmic, undharmic. And so he has to right this difficulty, and assuming and taking Rukmini for his bride, rather than being married to his enemy. All right.
Naraka, the king of Prajayotisha, was another wicked king like Kamsa, who defied all the gods. He was believed to be the son of Mother Earth, and had 16,000 daughters. Indra, the king of the gods, once personally came and complained to Sri Krishna against the king, stating that he had stolen the earrings of Aditya, the mother of all the gods. Sri Krishna promised to recover them from the demon. He went and killed Naraka and married his 16,000 daughters, while the Mother Earth herself came with the earring and presented them to the victor, informing him that this Naraka was his own son in one of his previous incarnations, and then she disappeared.
So we see that King Kamsa wasn't the only evil king that Sri Krishna had to be incarnated to uproot. Mm-hmm. It seems like practically every king in the area had some evil tendencies in them, and that's an extraordinary number of daughters. I don't know what that all means, but anyway, it's probably all very symbolic of something. I'm sure a lot of this has been mythologized. You can tell because it's mixing in ideas of deities and things. But whoever this is all based on was obviously an extraordinary incarnation of God who was able to defeat many evil kings and eventually give us the Bhagavad Gita. All right, so this is a supernatural incident which many people may not believe. It may also have an allegorical meaning, which is at once palatable. To be free is the nature of the soul, and hence it is perfectly happy in that state, being in its own natural element. This blissful state goes by the name of heaven. Therefore, whatever destroys the liberty of the soul must be regarded as the opposite to heaven, that is hell, or Naraka, and or naraka. And what is that? Desire. It is a fact that desire binds the man to earth. Whence does the desire come? It comes from the contact of the soul with the earth, or of Purusha with Prakriti. Sri Krishna killed this desire and converted the innumerable miseries, the offsprings of it, into the highest enjoyments by making them his subservient handmaids or obedient wives. Indra represents the unseen guru who revealed to him the extent of mischief which the desire is capable of making, so much so that even gods are not safe from its hands. So Ramakrishnananda is giving us a nice symbolic interpretation of this particular incident of the story, giving symbolic meaning to Indra, representing the unseen or inner guru, and how all of these desires spring forth, and we have to transmute them into servants of our spiritual life rather than as distractions of desire. All right, want to take a paragraph?
After this, Sri Krishna killed another demon who went by the name of Bana. Then he fought against the king of Pandra, named Vasudeva, a term which, besides the obvious meaning Vasudeva's son, also means the universe, namely God. This king proclaimed that he was the real Vasudeva, or the incarnation of God, whereas Sri Krishna, the son of Vasudeva, was a nobody. So Sri Krishna challenged him to fight. They met, and the latter, with all party, was killed in the battle.
Yeah, so, the ego often disguises itself in many ways and tries to sometimes rationalize and convince us of various things. And the real inner guru has to combat that. And so that's our spiritual life in a nutshell, is to combat the ego's tendency to convince us to do all sorts of crazy things to fulfill desires, which will never really be fulfilled, and overcome all of that and seek the true spiritual nature, which of course is represented by Sri Krishna here. And so we really have to look at the psychological interpretation of this particular story, the way it's presented, because there are so many symbolic elements. And whenever you see these elements of various gods and goddesses interacting with human beings and so forth, suspect that there is a deep psychological, spiritual interpretation to be made that is much more important than just a fun story. These are highly colorful stories which are captivating to the mind, but that's a good thing. We want these symbolic stories to be memorable so that we can remember the spiritual principles that are behind them. All right, we have time for another paragraph or two. Go ahead.
Yadu was the eldest child of Yayati, but being cursed by the father, he did not succeed him on the throne, which Puru, the younger son, occupied after his father's retirement. Yadu, however, ruled over some other territories, and his descendants went by the name of the Yadavas. These Yadavas were subdivided into several dynasties, such as Vrishni, Andaka, Kuruka, Posha, so forth. Sri Krishna belonged to Vrishni's family, and Kamsa and Devaki belonged to the Bhoja dynasty. Most of the Yadavas were living in Dvarka, ruled by Ugrasena and led by Sri Krishna, who was always kind to his relatives. Satrajit, a Yadava living in Dvarka at the time, got a very precious jewel, which Sri Krishna suggested to him to present to the king. But lest there should be any misunderstanding amongst his relatives on account of the jewel, Sri Krishna did not press his request too far. Satrajit loved the jewel very much and did not like to lose it. So fearing lest Sri Krishna might take it back from him, he gave it to his younger brother Prasna, who one day going to hunt was killed by a lion in the forest. This way, the jewel was lost. And Satyajit meanly thought that Sri Krishna must have killed his brother to get the jewel and spread such a rumor. This Sri Krishna was sorely troubled. He wanted to relieve himself from the calumny by recovering the jewel and went to the place where Prasenna was killed, and by the blood marks of a lion's paws, he found out the cause of his death. He also detected the bloody marks of a bear's paws side by side with the lion's at a little distance. Concluded the lion must have been killed by the bear. He followed the footmarks of the bear, was thus led to his den, where he fought with him, subdued him, and recovered the jewel from him. Not only that, the bear, who went by the name of Jambavavan and who had fought for Rama against Ravana in former days, being pleased with Sri Krishna's might and coming to know who he was, offered his beautiful daughter Jamvati in marriage to him. After returning to Dvarka, he gave the jewel to Satyajit, who too gave his most fair-looking daughter in marriage to him. So Krishna married many wives, but we have seen the 16,000 daughters of Naraka may be regarded as an allegory.
So, plenty of symbolism here as well. And many times animals are incorporated into mythological stories because of the kind of energies that they represent. And so, in this case, the bear remembers Rama, and so it's an interesting turn there. So all of these fascinating events are symbolic of our spiritual life, and we see how many times our spiritual life is put into danger, that all sorts of enemies come forward. When we see all these demons, psychologically, those are the temptations of the world and the things which prevent us from continuing our spiritual practice. And so the inner guru, the divine Atman, has to continually struggle to defeat all of these demons in the world, the demons of worldliness. It's very much like the Chandi, if you've read the Chandi or the Devi Mahatmyam, where all the different demons that the Divine Mother has to fight against are symbolic of various aspects of our ego. And so similarly, we have all of these various demons and evil kings that Sri Krishna has to fight against, and the various things that come to his aid. So we'll conclude with that, because the next paragraph goes on for 2 pages. So we'll conclude with that paragraph and can pick up where we've left off next week. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Filled with Brahman are the things we see. Filled with Brahman are the things we see not. From out of Brahman floweth all that is. From Brahman all, yet is it still the same. Om, peace, peace, peace.